My best friend's mom fell in the garden. Helping her changed everything. Eli loved visiting Myra's house. It was not just any house. It was a home surrounded by the most beautiful garden he had ever seen. The garden floated in layers, with platforms of grass, flowers, and tiny streams hovering a little above the ground. Small, glowing pollinators zipped around, and colorful vines swayed gently, even though there was no wind. The house and garden were a mix of technology and nature, designed to look natural but cared for by quiet, soft-spoken AI assistants. Eli's best friend, Myra, met him at the door. Her brown hair bounced as she ran toward him. "Eli, come see. I've been working on the upper garden today." Eli smiled. Myra always had a way of turning ordinary places into adventures. "I can't wait," he said, brushing his shoes on the mat. They ran across the floating pathways together, careful not to step on the hovering flowers. Eli always felt a little thrill when he balanced on the soft, suspended grass. Myra laughed behind him, and her joy made Eli laugh too. The upper garden was full of surprises, flowers that glowed when touched, tiny fountains that danced in patterns, and vines that grew as if they were breathing. "Look," Myra said, pointing to a section of the garden that seemed almost magical. The flowers there were pale blue and seemed to float in the air without stems. "I've been trying to get them to hover higher. I think they like sunlight more than I thought." Eli knelt down to touch one. It wobbled gently under his fingers and then floated a little higher, as if it had heard him. He grinned. "They really do respond to you," he said. "It's like they trust you." Myra smiled. "I think plants do a lot of things humans don't understand. I read somewhere that they can sense emotions. Maybe they like calm people more." Eli laughed softly. "Then I guess I'm the calm one here." They walked along the paths, exploring, testing, and talking. Eli loved how the garden made him feel like he could discover something new every day. But as they turned a corner near a small pond, Eli noticed Myra's mother carrying a large basket of floating vegetables. She was balancing carefully, but one of the glowing vines had snuck onto the path. "Mom, watch out!" Myra shouted, but it was too late. Her foot caught the vine and she lost her balance. For a split second, Eli froze, then he ran. He didn't even think. He just jumped, stretching his hands toward her. Myra's mother tilted sideways, reaching for the edge of the pond, but her hands slipped on the smooth platform. Eli grabbed her arm just in time, steadying her. The basket tumbled, scattering floating vegetables into the air like tiny stars, but her mother was safe. "Eli, thank you," Myra's mother gasped, holding onto him tightly. "I didn't see that vine. You saved me." Eli smiled nervously. I'm glad you're okay." Myra ran over and grabbed her mother's other arm. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No, no," her mother said, brushing herself off and laughing a little. "Just a little surprise, that's all. You two were very quick. Quick thinking saved me today." Eli felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had just helped someone he cared about, and it felt important. More important than anything else he had done in the garden before. As they helped put the vegetables back into the basket, Eli noticed something strange. Some of the flowers that had been floating near them earlier seemed to have leaned closer to him. The blue floating flowers wobbled and glimmered as if they had been watching everything. Eli blinked. "Did you see that?" he asked Myra. "Huh, see what?" "The flowers, they moved. When I helped your mom, they kind of responded." Myra frowned, stepping closer. "Flowers don't move like that. Are you imagining things?" "I don't think so," Eli said, lowering his voice. They sort of followed my hand. I didn't touch them, not really, but they reacted." Myra's mother overheard them and smiled. "Maybe it's a coincidence. Or maybe humans have a way of connecting with nature that machines can't replicate. I've read a little about it." "Machines?" Eli asked, confused. "The AIs," Myra's mother said, pointing toward the small robots hovering near the garden. "They were gentle and helpful, tending to the plants automatically." They care for the garden every day, but they don't understand it. They can water, trim, even adjust gravity, but they don't feel the garden. Humans do. Eli looked at the robots, then at the flowers that had bent slightly toward him. A new idea began to form in his mind. Could he actually communicate with plants in a way no AI could? Before he could think too much about it, Myra's mother set the basket down and sat on a low floating platform. "Come, sit," she said. "You two must be tired. But tell me, how did you manage to react so fast, Eli?" Eli shrugged. "I just saw you fall and ran. I didn't think. I just did it." "That's exactly it," she said with a smile. "Humans don't always calculate every step. You react with your heart, not your mind. That's something even the smartest machines cannot do." Myra and Eli looked at each other. There was something new in the air, a feeling that today had started differently than any other day. It wasn't just about playing in the garden anymore. It was about being noticed, being needed, and perhaps about learning something new. The afternoon sun shifted, casting golden light over the floating platforms. Eli noticed that the shadows of the plants also seemed to move differently, almost as if they were stretching toward him. He felt a sudden thrill, not fear, but excitement. There was something in the garden that he didn't understand, and yet somehow it felt familiar. "Come on," Myra said, tugging at his sleeve. "Let's help Mom clean up. The vegetables are floating all over the place." Together, the three of them gathered the vegetables, laughing as some floated out of reach only to be nudged gently by the hovering AIs. Eli's heart raced, but in a good way. He realized that helping someone, even in a small moment, could change the entire rhythm of a day. And perhaps the garden itself had noticed too. As they worked, Myra's mother talked about the garden, about the plants, and about how humans and machines could work together to keep it alive and beautiful. Eli listened carefully. Every word seemed to echo in his mind. There was a lesson here, he felt, a lesson about humans, nature, and the quiet power of noticing things that others might miss. When the last vegetable was back in the basket, Myra's mother looked at Eli and Myra and smiled warmly. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for helping me, but for reminding me that sometimes all it takes is one human gesture to change everything." Eli blushed, feeling proud but also a little shy. He hadn't expected anything so big from such a small act. But as he looked around the garden, at the hovering flowers and the tiny buzzing pollinators, he felt a strange connection, as if the garden itself had joined in the gratitude. Myra leaned close to him. "You know," she whispered, "I think the garden likes you." "It always reacts to you, doesn't it?" Eli smiled. "Maybe it does, or maybe humans just notice things that others don't. That's why we're special." Myra grinned. "I think you're right." The sun began to set, painting the garden in shades of pink and gold. Eli looked around and realized that today had been different. He had come to visit his friend, explore the garden, and enjoy the day. But instead, he had discovered something more, about himself, about humans, and about the quiet power of caring. As they left the upper garden and headed back toward the house, Eli felt a new sense of purpose. The garden was not just a place to play. It was a world full of small mysteries, waiting for humans to notice, understand, and care. And he, for the first time, realized that even a single, simple act, like helping someone who had fallen, could change everything. That evening, as Eli left Myra's house and walked home under the glowing sky, he thought about the flowers, the hovering vegetables, and the quiet AIs that tended the garden. He felt something shift inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: humans mattered. They mattered not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they could see, feel, and act in ways that no machine could. And in that realization, Eli found something extraordinary, the beginning of an adventure far bigger than a garden, far bigger than one afternoon, and perhaps far bigger than he could ever imagine. The morning after the fall in Myra's garden, Eli couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The way the floating flowers had leaned toward him, almost like they were watching, replayed in his mind again and again. He had tried to explain it to himself as a coincidence, but deep down, he felt that it was something more. Humans, he realized, could notice small details and react in ways machines could not. When Eli arrived at Myra's house, he found her in the lower garden, kneeling by a patch of soft green moss that shimmered faintly under the morning sun. "Good morning," Myra called, brushing her hands on her apron. "I was hoping you'd come. I want to show you something." Eli stepped carefully along the floating platforms, avoiding the small fountains that jetted water like silver threads. "What is it?" he asked, curiosity brightening his voice. Myra gestured to a group of plants growing along the edges of the garden. "These are the hover lilies," she said. "They're supposed to float steadily above the ground, but I noticed yesterday that they moved differently when you helped my mom. Watch this." She knelt beside the plants and waved her hands slowly over them. The hover lilies shifted slightly, but not much. Then she motioned for Eli to try. "Me," Eli said, feeling a little unsure. "Yes," Myra said firmly. "Just do what you did yesterday. Don't think too much, just act naturally." Eli nodded, remembering the moment when he had helped Myra's mother. He stepped forward, reaching gently toward the hover lilies. He didn't touch them. He simply let his hands hover near the flowers, moving slowly as if he were guiding them. To his surprise, the hover lilies began to drift upward, tilting slightly toward him. A soft, golden glow spread from their petals. Eli blinked. Did I do that?" Myra's eyes widened. "Yes, I've never seen them do that. Even the AIs can't make them move like this." Eli felt a rush of excitement. "But how? Why?" Myra shrugged. "Maybe humans just have a way of connecting with living things that machines don't. Maybe it's our feelings, or our attention." Eli tilted his head, thinking carefully. Machines could calculate everything perfectly. They could water the plants, trim them, adjust their hovering height. But they didn't notice subtle movements or tiny shifts in energy. Eli realized that maybe this was what Myra's mother had meant yesterday. Humans could act intuitively in ways no AI could predict. "Do you think it's only me?" Eli asked, a little nervous. "I don't know," Myra admitted, "but I think we should test it. Maybe we can understand something about the garden and about humans too." For the next few hours, Eli and Myra experimented with the plants. He discovered that the hover lilies responded differently depending on how he moved his hands, how calm he was, and even how he spoke. When he whispered softly, the petals seemed to stretch upward. When he moved slowly and carefully, the plants floated more steadily. The AIs hovered nearby, observing silently. They occasionally adjusted the position of a flower when it drifted too far, but even their precise calculations could not mimic what Eli was doing naturally. Eli noticed this and felt a strange sense of pride. Humans might not have the perfect memory or the fastest calculations, but they had something else, something machines could never fully copy. Myra watched Eli carefully, her curiosity growing. "It's like the plants know you're helping them." "Not just touching them, helping them," she said. "Maybe they do," Eli replied. He felt a warmth in his chest as he thought about it. Helping someone yesterday and now helping the plants seemed to create a connection. It was quiet, gentle, but it mattered. After a while, Myra's mother joined them in the garden carrying a small notebook. "I noticed you two have been very busy," she said, smiling. "What are you discovering?" Eli looked up, trying to explain. "The plants, they respond differently to humans than to the AIs. When I move slowly or help them, they float toward me, and the AIs can't do that." Her mother nodded slowly. "Yes, I've noticed that too. Humans have a way of sensing subtle changes, things machines can't calculate. It's called intuition, attention, and care. Even small acts of observation can create responses in living systems." Eli's eyes widened. "So, helping isn't just about doing something big. Even little things can make a difference." "Exactly," Myra's mother said. Yesterday, you helped me without thinking. That act changed something, not just for me, but maybe even for the garden. Small gestures can ripple farther than we expect. Eli looked around at the hovering flowers. The hover lilies seemed to glow more brightly now, almost as if they understood his thoughts. He realized that this garden was not just a collection of plants. It was a living system, responding to care, attention, and presence. "Do you think the plants can understand us?" Eli asked quietly. Myra smiled. "Maybe not in the way we understand each other. But they feel things in their own way. They react to kindness, calmness, and care. That's why you made them move." Eli's heart swelled with wonder. He had always thought he was small, just a kid in a big, floating garden. But now he understood that even he could influence something far bigger than himself. It was a small power, quiet and invisible but real. As they worked, Eli noticed a faint pattern. Not all plants reacted the same way. Some responded immediately, bending and floating gently toward him. Others only moved when Myra or her mother was near. And some hovered steadily, unaffected by any human presence. "It's like they each have their own personalities," Eli said, pointing to a small group of violet hover lilies. "These ones, they're shy. They wait to respond." Myra nodded. "I think you're right. Some plants need more time to trust us, just like people." Her mother chuckled softly. "That's a wonderful observation. Humans can form connections slowly, patiently, and the garden reflects that. It rewards care, not force." The afternoon passed quickly as they explored further. Eli discovered that the hovering vegetables from yesterday's spill also reacted differently to him than to the AIs. A floating tomato drifted gently toward his hand when he approached, while a small cucumber tilted slightly, as if bowing in acknowledgement. It was a strange, delightful feeling, one that made him realize humans had an influence that was subtle yet meaningful. "This is amazing," Eli said, looking around. "I never thought plants could respond like this." Myra grinned. "Neither did I. And we've only scratched the surface. Maybe the garden wants to teach us something." Her mother nodded. "And it will if you pay attention. Nature always responds to those who notice, who care, and who act with intention." Eli thought about the fall yesterday. He had acted without thinking, driven by instinct. That small act had mattered more than he realized. And now, in the garden, he was learning that attention and care could change the world in quiet, powerful ways. As the sun began to lower, casting a warm, golden glow over the floating platforms, Eli felt a sense of calm purpose. The garden was alive, more alive than he had ever noticed before. And he had become a part of it, not as a controller, not as a master, but as someone who could notice, care, and influence. Myra leaned on a low platform, looking at the hovering plants. "Do you think this means humans are special?" she asked softly. Eli thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think humans matter because we can notice things, help in ways machines can't, and connect with the world. Even small gestures, they can change everything." Her mother smiled, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "That's a lesson many forget, even in a world full of technology. It's a gift to understand the power of small, thoughtful actions, and you too are discovering it naturally." Eli felt proud but also curious. There was more to learn, he realized. The garden had only started to show him its secrets. And if this was just the beginning, then tomorrow would be another day of discovery, connection, and quiet wonder. As they gathered their things and walked back toward the house, Eli took a deep breath of the warm, fragrant air. The hovering flowers and vegetables seemed to shimmer in farewell, almost like tiny waves of gratitude. Eli smiled. He had come to the garden to play, but he was leaving with something more, a sense of human power, subtle and kind, that could shape the world in ways machines never could. That night, Eli lay in bed, thinking about the day. The images of hovering flowers, glowing pollinators, and responsive vegetables danced in his mind. He realized that humans had a unique place in the world. It wasn't about strength or speed, but about noticing, caring, and acting. And for the first time, he understood that helping someone, even in a simple, small moment, could change more than one life. It could change the world around them. The next morning, Eli woke up with a strange excitement in his chest. He had been thinking about the hover lilies, the floating vegetables, and the strange way the garden had responded to him. Something about the garden had changed after yesterday's fall, and today he was determined to explore it further. When he arrived at Myra's house, Myra was already waiting for him at the garden gate. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and in her hands she held a small notebook filled with sketches of the hover lilies, vines, and even the floating vegetables. "Good morning, Eli," she called, her voice full of energy. "I was thinking maybe we can do more than just watch the plants. Maybe we can see how far this human connection goes." Eli nodded, feeling a rush of anticipation. "What do you mean?" "Well," Myra said, flipping open her notebook, "I noticed yesterday that some plants reacted faster than others. Some hover lilies followed you immediately, but some were shy. Maybe it depends on how we act or how we move, or I don't know. We need to experiment." Eli smiled. He loved experiments. "Let's do it." They stepped into the upper garden, where the hover lilies floated gracefully above the soft grass platforms. The golden morning sunlight made the petals shimmer, and tiny glowing pollinators zipped around like living lanterns. Eli felt a thrill. The garden was alive, but it felt alive in a way he could influence. "Okay," Myra said. "First, we'll try to move the hover lilies without touching them, just our hands near them like you did yesterday." Eli stretched out his hands carefully. He moved slowly, trying to be calm. The hover lilies wobbled gently, then floated upward, bending toward him as if responding to a silent signal. Myra watched intently. "See, they're doing it again. They respond differently to humans than to the AIs." Eli tilted his head. "It's like they know we're helping them, not just moving them." "Exactly," Myra said. "Machines can calculate position and gravity, but they can't understand care. They can't notice tiny things." Eli's heart raced. He realized that the garden was not just a collection of plants and technology. It was a living system that responded to humans in ways machines could never mimic. And that was a special power, quiet but powerful. After a while, Myra suggested they try something new. "Let's see if we can influence the plant's growth. Not just movement, but actual growth patterns." Eli blinked. "Growth? Can we do that?" "We can try," Myra said confidently. "Humans notice small details. Maybe the plants respond to attention as much as water or sunlight. Let's see what happens." They knelt beside a patch of hover lilies and focused their attention on the smallest ones. Eli moved his hands slowly above the plants, letting his mind stay calm and open. He whispered softly, talking about how strong and beautiful they were, how they could float gracefully and reach the sunlight. At first, nothing happened, but after a few minutes, Eli noticed tiny buds forming at the base of the hover lilies. The petals seemed brighter, and a gentle upward pull lifted them slightly higher than before. Myra gasped. "Eli, look! Did you do that?" she asked, pointing to the tiny buds. Eli shook his head in disbelief. I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence." But Myra's mother, who had joined them quietly, smiled knowingly. "It's not a coincidence. Humans have a subtle influence on living systems that machines cannot replicate. You are noticing, feeling, and acting in ways that matter. That's why the plants respond to you." Eli felt a strange pride mixed with curiosity. He realized that humans were not just observers, they were participants. The garden responded to intention, patience, and care. Machines could measure and adjust, but they could not notice, feel, or understand. Humans could. For the rest of the morning, Eli and Myra experimented with other plants. Floating vegetables, tall glowing vines, and even moss patches reacted differently depending on who approached and how. When Eli moved slowly and spoke softly, the plants shifted gently. When Myra acted with calm focus, some of the vines reached slightly toward her. The AIs hovered nearby, analyzing every movement, but they did not react the same way. They adjusted positions mechanically when plants drifted, but they could not create the subtle shifts that Eli and Myra could. Eli noticed this and felt a new kind of confidence. Humans mattered, not because they were the fastest or the strongest, but because they could act in ways that were creative, intuitive, and kind. At noon, Myra suggested a new test. Let's see if we can coordinate together. Maybe the garden reacts differently when humans work as a team. Eli nodded eagerly. They placed their hands near the hover lilies simultaneously. Slowly, gently, they moved in harmony, whispering encouragement to the plants. The hover lilies floated higher, tilting gracefully toward both of them. Tiny buds appeared on several stalks and a soft glow spread through the petals. This is amazing, Eli said, astonished. It's like the garden is listening to us. It is, Myra said, her eyes wide. It's listening to humans, not just to machines. That's why it moves differently when we're here. Her mother watched with a warm smile. Humans have a unique gift. You notice what others might overlook. You care in ways that cannot be programmed. That's why the garden responds differently to your presence. And now you're discovering something very important. When humans work together, that power grows. Eli felt a thrill of understanding. The garden had always been alive, but it had never felt like it belonged to him until now. And now, with Myra and her mother by his side, he realized that humans had a subtle, invisible influence that could make a real difference. After a short break, Myra had another idea. Let's try something even more unusual. Let's see if the garden reacts to emotion, not just attention but actual feelings. Eli hesitated. Feelings? How do we do that? Just focus on what you feel, Myra explained. Calm, happy, kind. Imagine you're helping the garden grow. Imagine it can feel your thoughts. Eli closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He thought about helping Myra's mother yesterday, about the hover lilies responding, about the thrill of discovering something new. Slowly, he let the warmth of care fill him. The hover lilies began to sway gently, leaning closer toward him. The floating vegetables tilted slightly, as if bowing. Tiny buds appeared along the vines, and a soft golden light spread across the garden. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who didn't pay attention, but Eli felt it deeply. Myra's mother clapped softly. You see, humans are special because they notice, care, and act. Machines can calculate, measure, and adjust, but they cannot feel. And living systems respond to feeling. Eli opened his eyes, feeling a sense of awe. So, humans don't need to be the strongest or the fastest. We matter because we can notice, help, and care. Yes, Myra said firmly, and because we can share that care. Look what happens when we work together. The rest of the day passed like a dream. Eli, Myra, and her mother explored every corner of the garden, testing human influence on the plants, the floating vegetables, and even the moss patches. The AIs continued their work quietly, tending to practical needs, but the magic, the subtle movements, the blooms, the tiny responses, belonged to humans. As the sun began to set, casting soft golden and pink light across the floating platforms, Eli felt a deep satisfaction. He had discovered something extraordinary. Humans had a power that was quiet, invisible, but very real. Machines might be faster, smarter, or stronger in some ways, but humans could notice, care, and act in ways that living systems responded to. Myra looked at him, her eyes sparkling. Do you feel it too? She asked. Eli nodded. I do. It's amazing. The garden listens to us, and it matters. Her mother placed a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. Remember this feeling, Eli. You've learned something important. Humans can make a difference not by force, but by noticing, caring, and acting thoughtfully. That is your power. That is the human difference. Eli looked around the garden, at the hover lilies glowing softly, the floating vegetables tilting gently, and the moss patches shimmering in response to their presence. He realized that humans did matter, not because of strength or speed, but because they could influence the world in ways no machine ever could. And for the first time, he felt that helping someone, like Myra's mother yesterday, was more than just a small act. It was a way of connecting with the world, of creating change quietly and gently. As night fell and the garden lights glowed softly, Eli left Myra's house with a sense of purpose. He understood that humans had a special role, a subtle power that was invisible but real. The garden had shown him that humans could notice, care, and act in ways that mattered. And for Eli, that realization was only the beginning. The next morning, Eli felt a strange sense of anticipation as he walked toward Myra's house. Yesterday's discoveries had left his mind buzzing with possibilities. He couldn't stop thinking about how the hover lilies and floating vegetables had responded to humans in ways the AIs could never replicate. Something about the garden had changed, and Eli sensed that it was beginning to ripple beyond just Myra's home. When he arrived, Myra was already in the garden, kneeling by the floating moss beds. She looked up and waved excitedly. "Eli, come quick, you've got to see this." Eli hurried over. Myra pointed to a section of the garden where several plants had grown overnight in ways they never had before. The hover lilies hovered slightly higher, their petals glowing with a warm, golden light. The floating vegetables had arranged themselves into neat, playful patterns, almost like tiny messages or symbols. Even the moss patches had begun to form intricate swirls, as if dancing in response to the morning sun. "It's amazing," Eli whispered. "It looks like the garden changed by itself." Myra shook her head. "Not by itself, it's reacting to humans. Yesterday, you and I and even Mom, we influenced it. That's why it's different today." Eli's mind raced. Could this really be happening? Could a small act, a gentle human touch, actually influence the garden so much that it would grow and react differently the next day? Myra's mother approached with her usual calm smile. "It's true," she said. "Humans have a unique ability to notice, care, and act in ways that living systems respond to. Machines can tend the garden, but only humans can create these subtle, lasting changes. Your actions ripple farther than you realize." Eli looked around. The garden seemed almost alive in a new way. The glowing hover lilies twinkled softly, the floating vegetables swayed as if nodding to him, and the moss spirals shimmered. It was as if the garden itself had acknowledged him. "I didn't know helping someone or paying attention could do this," Eli said softly. "Most people don't notice," Myra's mother replied. "They think change requires strength or speed, but sometimes small acts of care are the most powerful." For the rest of the morning, Eli and Myra experimented with the garden, observing how their actions affected the plants, growth, and movement. Every small gesture, from whispering encouragement to carefully adjusting a hovering leaf, produced a response. Some plants grew taller, others bent slightly, and the floating vegetables rearranged themselves playfully. The AIs continued their duties silently, watering, adjusting gravity, and tending to practical needs, but they could not replicate the subtle, responsive shifts that Eli and Myra caused. The difference was clear. Humans were not just caretakers. They were participants, collaborators, and creators in the garden's life. By midday, word had spread through the neighborhood. Other children and parents began visiting Myra's garden, curious about the strange phenomena. They watched in awe as hover lilies bent toward Eli and Myra, vegetables tilted and hovered in gentle arcs, and moss patterns shifted subtly in response to attention. One of the visiting parents, Mr. Harris, a local teacher, asked, "How are you doing this?" "The AIs have been tending these gardens for years and nothing like this has ever happened." Eli smiled shyly. "I don't really know, I just notice, care, and act. The garden reacts to humans in ways machines can't. That's all." Myra's mother nodded. What you're seeing is real. Humans have a unique influence on living systems. You're witnessing the result of attention, patience, and gentle action. The garden recognizes these qualities and it responds. Eli felt a mixture of pride and wonder. It was incredible to think that simple, thoughtful gestures could ripple outward, affecting not only plants but also the people around him. He realized that humans could create change without needing force, speed, or technology. Their presence, care, and intention were enough. Over the next few days, the garden began to attract more attention. Scientists from the City Planet's Central Research Lab visited to study the unusual growth patterns and responses. They observed how the plants reacted to Eli, Myra, and their mother, and how different humans influenced different sections of the garden. One scientist, Dr. Wren, leaned down beside Eli and whispered, "Do you realize what you're showing us? This is unprecedented. Plants responding to humans in ways machines cannot replicate. It's remarkable. You might be discovering something very important." Eli blinked in surprise. "Really? I'm just helping and paying attention." "That's exactly why it's so important," Dr. Wren said. "You're demonstrating a human difference that machines cannot copy. Your intuition, care, and subtle actions are creating real effects in the living system." Eli felt a thrill. Humans weren't just small or weak or ordinary. They had something extraordinary, the ability to notice, feel, and act in ways no machine could. And now the world was starting to notice. As the garden grew and responded to the attention of more humans, the floating plants began forming intricate patterns that seemed almost like messages or symbols. Some hover lilies arranged themselves into circles, while clusters of floating vegetables formed arcs and waves. Even the moss spirals created designs that changed throughout the day, shifting subtly as humans moved through the garden. Eli realized that the garden was not just reacting, it was communicating in its own way, responding to human care and intention. And the more humans participated, the more the garden flourished. By the afternoon, the once private garden had become a hub of quiet wonder. Children laughed and explored, parents observed with curiosity, and the AIs continued their precise tasks. But the magic, the subtle, responsive life of the garden belonged to humans. Myra leaned toward Eli, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's incredible, isn't it? The garden responds differently to us. We're making a difference just by noticing and caring." Eli nodded. "I never thought humans could do something like this, without machines or technology, just by being ourselves." Her mother smiled. "And that's the lesson here. Human actions, no matter how small, ripple outward. Care, attention, and gentle intention create real effects. You're seeing the power of humans in a world full of machines." Eli thought back to yesterday, when he had helped Myra's mother fall safely in the garden. That simple act had been the start of everything. From one small gesture, ripples had spread across the garden, touching plants, people, and even the visiting scientists. The realization filled him with a quiet pride. Humans didn't need to be the fastest, the strongest, or the most advanced. They needed to notice, care, and act. That was their power. That was the human difference. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floating platforms, Eli and Myra sat together in the upper garden. The hover lilies floated gently around them, glowing softly, while the moss spirals shimmered with delicate patterns. Floating vegetables hovered in playful arcs, responding subtly to their presence. Eli looked around, feeling a deep connection to the garden. "It's amazing how everything changes when we care," he said softly. Myra nodded. "And the more we notice, the more it changes. We're part of it now." Her mother joined them, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Remember, Eli, this is only the beginning. Humans influence the world in ways that are subtle, invisible, and powerful. Your actions, your care, and your attention create real effects. And the garden is just one example. The same principle applies everywhere." Eli thought about that. The garden had taught him something important. not just about plants, but about humans' life and the quiet ways change could happen. He realized that even small gestures like helping someone or noticing a tiny detail could ripple outward, touching more lives than he could imagine. That evening, as Eli walked home under the glowing sky, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that humans mattered, not because of strength or speed, but because they could notice, care, and act in ways that created real effects in the world. And for Eli, that realization was only the beginning. The next day, the City Planet's Central AI Council sent representatives to observe the garden. They were curious about the unusual phenomena, how the hover lilies, floating vegetables, and moss spirals had responded in ways machines could not predict. Eli, Myra, and her mother explained what they had discovered: attention, care, intention, and human presence. The representatives watched silently as Eli approached a group of hover lilies. He moved slowly, calmly, and whispered softly. The hover lilies tilted gently toward him. Floating vegetables arranged themselves into arcs and patterns. The moss spirals shifted subtly in response to his movement. The representatives recorded everything, taking notes and asking questions. They were fascinated. Machines could not replicate this. Humans had a unique influence, something quiet, invisible, but undeniable. Eli realized that the garden had shown the world something important. Humans were not ordinary, weak, or replaceable. They had something special, the ability to notice, care, and act in ways that mattered. And that power, though subtle, could ripple outward and change everything. The garden had changed. What once was simply a place for play and exploration had become a living, glowing testament to human care and attention. The hover lilies floated gracefully, their petals shimmering like gold in the morning sun. Floating vegetables drifted lazily in gentle arcs, responding subtly to every step, every movement of the humans around them. The moss spirals shifted and swirled, forming delicate patterns that seemed to echo the rhythm of life itself. Eli walked through the upper garden with Myra and her mother, taking in the scene. He felt a strange sense of pride mixed with awe. He had never imagined that something as simple as noticing and caring could ripple outward so profoundly. "Look at this," Myra said, kneeling beside a cluster of hover lilies. "They're moving almost like a dance. They know we're here." Eli smiled softly. "It's like they remember us, like they respond to who we are, not just what we do." Her mother joined them, holding her notebook filled with sketches and observations. "That's exactly right. Humans influence the world in ways that machines cannot. Your presence, attention, and care create changes that last, and now the garden is showing the results." Eli felt his chest swell. He remembered the fall, the moment when he had helped Myra's mother. That simple act had set everything in motion. From one small gesture, ripples had spread across the garden, touching the plants, the people, and even the visiting scientists. "This garden, it's alive in a new way," Eli said quietly. "Not because of machines or technology, but because of humans." Myra nodded. "We helped it together. That's the difference we make." Later that day, representatives from the City Planet's Central AI Council returned. They had come to see the progress, to observe the effects of human influence firsthand. Eli, Myra, and her mother led them through the garden, showing how small gestures, calm presence, and careful attention created movements, blooms, and patterns that machines could not replicate. One of the council members, a tall AI assistant designed to study ecosystems, floated silently as Eli approached a group of hover lilies. He moved slowly, his hands hovering above the petals. He whispered softly, encouraging the plants. The hover lilies tilted toward him, golden light spreading across their petals. Floating vegetables aligned themselves into arcs, and moss spirals shifted in delicate patterns. The AI Council observed quietly, taking notes and recording data. Despite their programming and precision, they could not replicate Eli's influence. Machines could calculate, adjust, and maintain, but they could not create the subtle, intuitive effects that humans generated naturally. "This is remarkable," one of the council representatives said. "The garden responds to humans in ways that cannot be programmed or calculated. It reacts to attention, care, and intention. This is unprecedented." Eli felt a quiet pride. Humans mattered, not because of strength or speed, but because they could notice, care, and act in ways that created real, lasting effects. He realized that even small gestures, helping someone, observing closely, acting thoughtfully, could ripple outward and change more than one life. As the day passed, more children and adults arrived to observe the garden. They too began experimenting, guided by Eli and Myra's gentle instruction. Some hovered their hands near the plants, others whispered soft encouragement. Slowly, carefully, the garden responded. The hover lilies bent, the floating vegetables shifted, and the moss spirals created new patterns. Eli noticed something wonderful. Each human had a slightly different effect on the garden. Some brought out shy blooms, others inspired intricate moss patterns, and a few encouraged the floating vegetables to dance playfully. The garden seemed to recognize individuals, responding uniquely to their care and attention. "This is incredible," Myra said, her eyes wide. "The garden is alive in a way I never imagined, and it's because humans are part of it now." Eli nodded. "It's not just about us helping the garden, it's the garden helping us see what humans can do." Her mother smiled. "Exactly. The garden is teaching everyone an important lesson. Humans have a unique power. Not the power of machines, not the power of force, but the power of noticing, caring, and acting thoughtfully. That power ripples farther than you realize." By evening, the garden glowed softly under the setting sun. The hover lilies shimmered in gold and pink, the floating vegetables drifted lazily in playful arcs, and moss spirals glowed with delicate patterns. Children laughed as they moved carefully through the garden, learning to notice the subtle responses of the plants. Parents watched, amazed at how human care created movement, growth, and beauty that machines could never replicate. Eli sat with Myra on a low, floating platform. "Do you think humans are really that important?" he asked softly. Myra smiled. "I think so. Look at what we're doing, just noticing, caring, and acting, and the garden responds. It matters." Her mother joined them, placing a hand gently on Eli's shoulder. "Humans matter in ways that cannot be measured by speed, strength, or technology. Your presence, your thoughtfulness, your care, these are things that create real change. You've seen it in the garden, and now the world can see it too." Eli thought about the ripple effect. From helping Myra's mother yesterday to influencing the hover lilies, floating vegetables, and moss, to inspiring the visiting scientists, he realized that humans could create lasting effects quietly, subtly, and beautifully. "This garden, it's like a reflection of us," Eli said softly. "The more we notice and care, the more it blooms." Myra nodded. "Exactly, and that's the human difference. We create change without force. We notice, care, and act. That's enough." As night fell, the garden transformed under the glow of soft bioluminescent lights. Hover lilies glimmered in gentle golden hues, floating vegetables drifted in slow, graceful arcs, and moss spirals glowed softly with intricate patterns. Eli looked around, feeling a deep connection to this living, breathing ecosystem. For the first time, he understood something profound. Humans had a place in the world that no machine could replace. They mattered because of their ability to notice, care, and act thoughtfully. That was their power. That was the gift of being human. Over the next few days, word of the garden's unique responsiveness spread throughout the city planet. Scientists, teachers, children, and families visited to witness the extraordinary effects of human care. Everyone marveled at how small gestures, attention, and intention could create movements, growth, and patterns that machines could not replicate. Eli and Myra became teachers in their own right, guiding visitors in gentle observation, careful attention, and subtle interaction. The garden became a hub of learning, creativity, and wonder. Humans discovered that they were not only caretakers of the garden, they were partners in its life, able to inspire, guide, and influence it in ways that machines never could. One afternoon, as Eli walked through the upper garden, he noticed a hover lily leaning slightly toward him, petals glowing brighter than usual. A floating tomato rotated gently, tilting toward his hand. Moss spirals shimmered and shifted, forming a perfect circle around him. He smiled. "It's like the garden knows me," he whispered. Myra appeared beside him. "It does. The garden responds to humans who notice, care, and act, and now it recognizes you." Her mother nodded. "And that is a lesson for all of us. Humans have a subtle but powerful influence. You can create change quietly, beautifully, and meaningfully. And that power, once discovered, spreads farther than you realize." Eli thought about the first day, when he had helped Myra's mother fall in the garden. One small act had led to so much growth, discovery, and wonder. From a simple gesture of care had come a blooming future, a garden that thrived on attention, kindness, and human presence. That evening, as the city planet's twin moons rose in the sky, casting soft light over the floating garden, Eli felt a sense of fulfillment. He had learned something extraordinary. Humans mattered not because they were the fastest, strongest, or most advanced, but because they could notice, care, and act in ways that created real, lasting change. The hover lilies floated in gentle arcs, glowing warmly. The floating vegetables drifted lazily, responding to human presence with subtle playfulness. Moss spirals shifted delicately, forming patterns of light and movement. And in all of this, Eli saw the reflection of humanity itself, quiet, thoughtful, and profoundly influential. Myra leaned on his shoulder, smiling. "The garden will keep growing and humans will keep learning, and together we'll make a difference." Eli nodded, watching the garden shimmer and glow. "Yes, together." The garden had shown him something that no machine, no technology, no calculation could ever teach: the quiet, gentle, and invisible power of humans. And that power, Eli realized, could ripple outward to touch the world, one small act at a time. As the night deepened, Eli closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the garden's life around him. Hover lilies, floating vegetables, and moss spirals glimmered softly, responding to his presence. The garden, alive and attentive, had become a testament to human care, curiosity, and thoughtful action. Eli smiled. He knew that the future held more discoveries, more learning, and more opportunities to notice, care, and act. And in that he found hope, joy, and the quiet pride of being human, because humans mattered, and they always would.